My name is Latrice Westbrooks, and currently I serve in Mississippi as your Court of Appeals judge, and I have been having the honor and privilege of doing that for the last 5 years. So I thank you, Mississippi. Now I'm going to get into some little-known Black history facts that Pastor Whitfield did not share with you all. Now, when he talked about the Second Circuit District, that's right here in Harrison County. And so my legal career started right here on the Gulf Coast in Gulfport, Mississippi. Now, in 1993, it is a fact, and I told Pastor Whitfield, if you get into that story, I'm going to get you, okay? And I'm going to get you good. It is a fact that in 1993, I got on a plane for the very first time at the age of 21 to fly across the world to South Africa. That is a fact. What is also a fact is that I did get on the plane with a bag filled with toilet paper as opposed to toiletries. That is a fact, okay? Now, when I got on the plane with all this toilet paper, they did laugh at me all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, through Brazil, all the way to South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa. They did. But what Pastor Whitfield did not tell you all, when we were out in the fields and the bushes in the countryside, and there was not a working bathroom with a flushing toilet for miles around, guess who was the only one who had the toilet paper? And guess who was the one who got to charge for $1 per roll for that toilet paper? So, yes, guess who got the last laugh? But it was such a wonderful time, and that was my first time meeting Pastor Whitfield. We sat next to each other on the plane, and my ears were popping, and he was the one that told me how to keep my ears from popping. And so what I didn't know is in 1993 that encounter on the airplane would turn into a nearly 30-year friendship, and that I have been so grateful for. And what really happened is that he got the little sister that he really never thought he was going to get. So I want you all, we're going to jump right into it because I do have a message that I want to share with you. And knowing our history is so very important, not just for the fact of just knowing the history, but it does really shape who we have been and who we are to become. And so I'm appreciative of the topic that we have to cover here today, which is know your past and shape your future. And I'm going to speak from the scriptures, 3 scriptures, so follow me now. First of all, we have Deuteronomy, chapter 6, 5 through 7. We also have Deuteronomy 32, chapter 32, verse 7. And we also have Romans, chapter 15, verse 4. Now, I would not be a good Baptist servant if I did not bring greetings from my church, my home church, Cade Chapel in Jackson, Mississippi, Cade Chapel Missionary Baptist Church in Jackson, Mississippi, under the leadership of Reverend Reginald and Dr. Lucretia Buckley, who have both been such wonderful mental and spiritual guides to me since I joined the church. So, greetings from Cade Chapel. Now, Deuteronomy, in this message, we have a charge that is not only given to us because we have to know our history, and the way we know our history is that we have to share it throughout generations. And so in Deuteronomy chapter 6, 5 through 9, it says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. The New Life Application Bible also says, repeat them again and again. That is the command for the parents, to repeat them again and again to your children. But Deuteronomy doesn't just stop there. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 7, the scripture says, remember the days of long ago. Think about the generations of the past. Ask your father, and he will inform you. Inquire of the elders, and they will tell you. So that is the charge given to the children, that we are supposed to ask our parents, we are supposed to ask our grandparents and our elders about our history. We are supposed to be inquisitive and wanting to know about our history. That is how we get to know our history. But then we go to Romans 15, verse 4. And it says, such things were written in the scriptures long ago to teach us. They give us hope and encouragement as we patiently wait for God's promise. The purpose of sharing our history from generation to generations, the purpose of the parents repeating the history and the children being curious and wanting to know about the history and inquire about the history, is so we can continue to have hope and encouragement, so we can continue to do God's wills and God's work for generations to come. That is why when knowing your history, knowing your past, and shaping your future, it does something. The first thing it does, it starts to change your perception and your perspective. The second thing it does is that it gives you your purpose. It helps shape your purpose. The third thing it does is that it empowers you and it gives you pride. So those things, it shapes your perception, it gives you purpose, and it gives you pride. I have a good friend named Joyce Neely, who I also met in college. And Joyce and I were talking a long time ago, and she told me something that her mother shared with her. And it's something that has stayed with me, and I've often repeated. And that is, there is nothing better than an understanding. There is nothing better than an understanding. When you know your history and it starts to change your perception, that means it starts to change your ideology and your understanding of things, not just about yourself, but also about your family. It starts to change your perception about our culture. It starts to change your perception about your community and how you interrelate with it. That is why it is so important. That is the first thing that it does. I was also sharing with Pastor and a few friends about my relationship with math. And this is why, when knowing your history, this is how powerful it can be. When I was in the 7th grade, I took math. All of my friends and I, we were in the same math class. And so what I didn't realize at the time is that we were getting ready to take a standardized test to see who can advance onto algebra. And so we all took the test, and my closest friends went on and advanced to algebra. I did not advance. I stayed in regular math. But what did that do? No one came and said, you're still good at math, you're okay, perhaps we should get you a tutor if you really want to advance. No one said that. Instead, I internalized that I was bad at math. And internalizing that I was bad at math, that means I approached math in a very poor manner. I did not believe that I could do equations, and that was reflected in my grades in math. So from the 7th grade up until I was in college, I was not good at math. But then, thank God, I started learning about the history of my people. and how Egyptians and were actually Africans, because of course, you know, historically they've taken Egypt out of Africa. And how we not only mastered math, but in some instances we created math and science, and we excelled in those areas. And so I started to think, if my ancestors mastered math, why am I failing at it? And so I started to internalize math differently. I started to approach it differently. And I got a tutor, and I had someone to work with me, and I realized that I comprehended differently. Not that I couldn't get it, but I just comprehended it differently. So I could not approach math like someone else, like a friend or a family member approached it. I had to approach it as only Latrice Westbrooks could approach it. And for the first time in 7 years, I will never forget it, I made a 101 on a math test. So much so, I took it to our college professor, and I had to show it to him, and I had to thank him for being able to teach me about my history, and not knowing that it would impact how I approach one of the worst subjects that I have ever had in my life. That is the power of knowing our history. That's what happens. It started to change my perception. It changed how I approached a particular subject. And that's when I realized that there was an interrelationship between my ability to create, but also my ability to master things. That is the power in knowing your history, so it can then shape your future. Now, I'm going to take it a step further because, you know, we know about the great leaders in world history, African leaders in world history, Africans and African Americans in world history. We know about Malcolm X. We know about Martin Luther King Jr. We know about W.E.B. Du Bois. We know about Thurgood Marshall. But do you know about those people, your direct ancestors in your family? Do you know the great works that your great-grandparents did? Do you know the great works that your grandparents have done right in your own community? Do you know about the great works of your great-uncles and your great-aunts? Do you know about them? Because the greatness that resided in them that caused them to do things that they did to help their fellow man reside within you. Now, my great-grandfather was Charlie Clifton Westbrooks. He died at 104 back in 2000. I was living here at the time when he passed away, when he transitioned. But what I didn't know at the time is that my great-grandfather, actually, my family is from a really small town called Webb, Mississippi. Yes, if you blink, you will miss it. It's between Greenwood, going up Highway 49, and Clarksdale, Mississippi. Well, when you turn off into Webb, now Webb is the main city, but when you turn off into Webb, you'll go back into the country, you'll go back into the fields, you'll go back into the bushes, and you'll go into an area, a community called Sharkey County Community. And that's where my family resided, that's where we grew up, my grandparents, and my mother, she was born there. And so that's where our roots came from in West Mississippi. Well, my great-grandfather decided to purchase a bus, and he used that bus for public transportation for the people in our community. Now, I'm an extension of him, so yes, it was my community too, okay? And so he used that bus to transport people for 50 cents round trip to go from the Sharkey County community over to Charleston if they need to go to town in Charleston, which is about 10, 20 miles away, or if they needed to go to town in Webb, which was about maybe another 5 to 10 miles away. So you're in the middle of nowhere, and he figured out that if I have this bus, I'm not just going to use it for my own good or the good of my immediate family, I'm going to use it for the good of the community. And that's what he did. And not only did he do that, he passed that on to my great uncle Drew, who was my grandfather's baby brother. Now I'm gonna go back to Deuteronomy, okay? Because I did what Deuteronomy 32 said you're supposed to do. One day I'm sitting down with my grandfather, and I don't know, I was a curious, nosy child. I asked him, I said, Granddaddy, because he went to the Army. My grandfather served in the Army. His older brother, Jim, also served in the Army. But Uncle Drew did not serve in the Army. And so I asked him, the innocence of a child, I said, well, Granddaddy, why didn't Uncle Drew serve in the Army? And his answer was just as simple as it could be. He said Uncle Drew stayed at home to stay with Mom and Daddy and help them with the farm. And what happened is that Uncle Drew also saw a need to help the family and to help the community. This man, and as a child, you don't think about it, but as I got older and more mature, I realized it. Uncle Drew was actually the first entrepreneur I ever knew. Uncle Drew, not only did he take what Big Daddy, we call great-granddaddy, Big Daddy did, and he started to use the same public transportation to take people to and from town. And also, let me say this, I didn't mention this, they also transported children to and from school. Black children to and from school, okay? Not only did Uncle Drew take on the legacy of what Big Daddy started, but Uncle Drew also started and opened up a convenience store called Westbrooks Groceries right there in the middle of the country. And then he took that, now that provided food for people in the Sharkey County community, again. But not only did he do that, when I went down there, the next thing I know, he had a gas station going. He had 2 gas pumps at that little convenience store that you had to get to that for a long time, Sharkey Road was a dirt, rock paved road, was a dirt road. And there in the middle of nowhere was a gas station. That meant that people in the community did not have to drive another 10 to 20 miles just to get gas. They could get it right there in their community. That's entrepreneurship. That's thinking outside the box. And he did that. And again, I started to wonder, well, if Uncle Drew could do that, why can't I do it? Why can't we have a Westbrooks grocery chain? Why can't we have gas stations? That's the type of thinking that you instill in your children when they see the greatness, when they start to think about the greatness that is in their ancestors. Now, in doing that, you start to realize your purpose. And when you know your past and it starts to shape your future, in that, it starts to help you shape your purpose. Now, your purpose on this earth is not for your own selfish needs. Your purpose on this earth is to serve others. It is to serve your community. Now, Ephesians 2nd chapter, 10th verse, says we are God's masterpiece. He created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do good things he planned for us. Philippians 2 and 4 also says, let each of you look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Now, I'm a Baptist girl. I have to relate scriptures to everything that I do because this is our framework and our workbook for how we should live our lives. And also how we look at our history and how we approach certain things. If I am looking at my purpose is not just for me. God says my purpose is not just for me. My purpose is to bless others. That is what our purpose is designed to do. And I want to just focus on we are God's masterpiece. That means that we are not made by mistake. We are made by design, and we are made by design to do those things that he would have us to do. So remember that we are his masterpiece. We are here for a reason. We're here to carry out that purpose that God has put us on this earth to do. And remember, you are not a mistake. Yes, we all fall short of the glory of God because we are not God, but we are made in his likeness. We are created in his image. And what is in us, what is in him is in us. That's right. Knowing your history and in shaping your future, in that it begins to empower you. Now, what did I just say? That the Spirit of God resides in us. And scriptures tells us that the spirit that resides in you is greater than any spirit that is out there in the world. All right. So and I want to take that a step further, that if our ancestors' spirit resides in us, then that means their creativity, their innovation, their will, their perseverance also resides within us. So if they can take an entrepreneurial spirit and go out there and do things that betters humankind, then we have that same ability within us. I want us to go to 1 John 4:4. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but it says, it reminds you that you have already won the fight. I'm going to repeat that. You have already won the fight. Because the spirit, again, that is in you is greater than any spirit in the world. God has already told us. Knowing your past has already told you and tells you that you have already won the battle. The only thing we are charged to do is what Deuteronomy told us to do, is to share it with one another. Share it and repeat it with your children. Share your family's history with your children. Tell them how great their parents were. Tell them how great your uncles and aunts were. Tell them, even if it's not in your immediate family, you know someone in the community who was able to go out there and do great work. Share that with them. And children, it is incumbent upon us to ask those questions. Be curious about the good things in the world, about the good things in your community, about the good things in your family, and ask them, where was that seed planted? Yes. It is incumbent upon us because, again, once we know those things, we know there is nothing new under the sun. We know if they did it once, we can do it again. Yeah. Now, my message, Pastor, I told you, was going to be straight to the point. Yeah, I know you're going to pull me. But that is why knowing your past is so important, because it does shape your future. When it empowers you, it gives you pride. When you know your purpose, you can go out there and you can execute your purpose. When your ideology changes, when your perception changes, your perception of yourself, it changes your perspective of the world. It gives you confidence. It gives you self-assurance. And it tells you that you can go out there and you can do anything. Our mantra in elementary school, when you're telling 5-year-old children, if I try hard enough, I can do anything. That is powerful. That is what we should share with each other. When you try hard enough, your ancestors were not that great in terms of being supernatural. We all have the ability to work hard, and if you just try, you can do anything. I'm going to close out again and saying, when you know your past, you can shape your future. It changes your perception. It gives you purpose, and it empowers you. So I'm going to charge you to go out there and do exactly what Deuteronomy tells us to do. Repeat it, share it, ask for it, inquire about it, because at the end of the day, it gives us hope, and it encourages us. I hope this message has blessed someone, and it reminds you that you are great, so go out there and be great. Thank you.